The title of my talk is on the learnability of nuclear and prenuclear accent, using Taiwan Mandarin learners of English as an example. I'm Chien, and we are from National Taiwan University. In this study, I will introduce the definition and characteristics of pitch accent in English. Then, I will discuss the assignment of pitch accent, which include placement of pitch accent, number of pitch accent, and pitch accent assignment in L2 acquisition. Further, I would like to discuss the actual realization of pitch accent, which include their phonological realization and their phonetic realization, and how pitch accents are realized in L2 production. Pitch accents are syllables that carry prominence at the sentence or phrase level, and it's a term used in the AM theory by Pierre Humbert. Based on the position they occur, pitch accent can be classified into nuclear accent and prenuclear accent. Nuclear accent is the last and most important pitch accent in a phrase, and it's considered obligatory. Prenuclear accents are pitch accents that occur before the nuclear accent, and it's considered optional. Nuclear accent is the structural head of an intonational unit, and it's perceived as more prominent, and this is supported by experimental evidence. Prenuclear accents, on the other hand, are used mainly for rhythmical and metrical purposes, and they are considered as less prominent, and they are considered as optional or even ornamental in previous studies. First of all, this study focused on the assignment of pitch accent, and this includes the placement of pitch accent in an intonational phrase. Pitch accents are usually placed on stressed syllables, and function words are usually not assigned with pitch accents. Also, the placement of prenuclear accents in a sentence is more variable than the placement of nuclear accents. As for number of pitch accents, languages may differ in their density of pitch accent, which means that some languages may have more pitch accent than other languages. For example, in Indian English, they have more pitch accent than other English varieties. Another extreme case is Egyptian Arabic, in which every content word is associated with a pitch accent in the language. In L2 production, how pitch accents are assigned are also widely discussed in L2 studies. One of the most common phenomena is incorrect assignment of pitch accent, where L2 learners were found to assign their pitch accent on the wrong positions in their L2 speech. Another common phenomena is over-accentuation, which means L2 learners tend to overproduce pitch accent in their L2 speech. And this phenomena occurs in learners with different L1 background, including Mandarin learners of English, Egyptian Arabic learners of English, and also Mandarin, French, Polish, Hungarian learners of Dutch. So it's still not clear whether this is a universal L2 acquisition pattern or this is a specific L1 transfer. The second focus of this study is the realization of pitch accent, and we are interested in pitch accent realization both on the phonological level and the phonetic level. Let's first look into the phonological realization. Pitch accent can be phonologically realized by tone types, which is their categorical representation. According to the Toby system, different types of pitch accent are realized by the combination of different tonal targets, and each tone type has its own tune. So languages may differ in their inventories of pitch accent tone types and the meanings associated with these tone types. For example, the L plus H star and the L star plus H tone are phonologically distinct in English and German, but not in Dutch. Also, these two kinds of tone types are used to signal newness and mark focus in both English and German. However, how L2 learners make tone type choices is relatively less mentioned in L2 studies. But the existing literature have found that native speakers and L2 learners have different choices of pitch accent tone type. And what's interesting is their tone type choices were found to progress toward native-like patterns as their proficiency increased. Given a specific pitch accent tone type, we would like to look into its actual phonetic realization. For example, their alignment of tonal targets, which is the timing of tonal targets relative to the segmental string. Instead of categorical, this is a more gradient measurement. For example, the L plus H star tone type that we just previously mentioned can be phonetically realized by calculating the distance from the H-star target to the segmental string, such as the onset of the syllable. Tonal alignment is interesting to study because languages may have their own preferred characterizing tonal alignment pattern. In English, peak alignment is affected by multiple phonetic factors, such as speech rate. In Mandarin, however, alignments are relatively stable and less affected by phonetic factors. So it's not surprising to find that L2 learners were found to have different alignment pattern than the native speakers, and this is supported by language learners with different L1 backgrounds. So our research questions are pretty straightforward. Our questions follow in line with what we just mentioned. We would like to know for Mandarin learners of English, would their number of prenuclear accent and accent placement be different from the native English speakers? Secondly, would their phonological realization of pitch accent, meaning their choice of tone types, be different from the native speakers? Thirdly, would their phonetic realization, their tonal alignment, of the same tone type be different from the native speakers, and would this be related to their L1? And lastly, given the special prominence of nuclear positions, we would like to know whether nuclear accents would be easier to acquire than prenuclear accents in an L2 setting. Two groups of speakers are recruited in this study. The first is the native English group, which includes 22 Native American English speakers from the U.S. The second group is the advanced EFL group, which includes 22 Mandarin Chinese speakers in Taiwan, and they are all advanced learners of English. The reading materials are 21 English declarative sentences in the form of I know the word something. For example, I know the word bay. And the last target word is monosyllabic CV or CVC words, which we assume would receive the nuclear accent. Also, there are 21 Mandarin declarative sentences in the form of 这个字念 something, which means this character reads something. And the last target words are all phonetically match Mandarin tone for syllables as the English ones. And this materials is for EFL learners only. For our analysis, we would first identify the placement of prenuclear accent in the sentence. The prenuclear accent could be either on I, no, or word, or they could have no prenuclear accent at all in a sentence. Then, the tone type choices of nuclear and prenuclear accents were labeled according to the Toby system. This is an example of an H-star tone. This is an example of an L plus H-star tone on the word no. Then, tonal target alignment was measured for a particular tone type. We measure it by calculating the distance from the H-star target and the L target to the onset of the syllable no. So, we use the timing of H-star that occurred in no, divided by the total duration of no. Here is the results of this study. For assignment of pitch accent, we first look into the number of prenuclear accents in the sentence between the two groups. This figure shows the number of prenuclear accents among native speakers' production and EFL learners' production. As we can see, for native speakers, 70% of the sentences were produced with one prenuclear accent, while the other rest was produced with no prenuclear accent at all. For EFL learners, 70% of their sentences were produced with two prenuclear accents. So in general, EFL learners produce many more prenuclear accents than the native speakers. As accent density may be related to prosodic grouping and disfluency in L2 production, pauses were identified in both EFL and native speakers' production. Among all the sentences, each sentence was labeled as either pause or no pause. This figure presents the relation between number of prenuclear accents and the presence of pauses. So in general, EFL learners had a higher proportion of sentences containing pauses, and the sentences which they produced with two prenuclear accents had 74% of them produced with pause. In general, sentences that were assigned with more prenuclear accents had higher proportion of pauses, and this is especially true for the EFL learners. Next, for the placement of prenuclear accent, there are 4 conditions found in this study. First, the prenuclear accent may occur on the word I, or on the word no, or both on the word I and word, or both on the words no and word. This is the placement of prenuclear accent among native English speakers and the EFL learners. As we can see, 5 accent placement patterns were found in the EFL learners' production, while the native speakers only have 3. Therefore, the EFL learners were more variable in their accent placement than the native speakers, and only EFL learners placed accent on the word word. For choice of tone type, this is the choice of tone type in the nuclear accent. As we can see, for both groups of speakers, H star is the predominant tone type, and there was not much difference found between the native speakers and the EFL learners. However, the tone type choices for the prenuclear accent is more complicated. This is the tone type choices of prenuclear accents between both groups. As we can see, H star and L plus H star is the most popular tone type for both groups of speakers. However, for native speakers, 4 kinds of tone types were identified, while the EFL learners only have 3, lacking the H plus downstep H star tone type. Lastly, we look into the tonal target alignments of the most popular tone types on the most commonplace words. This is the alignment of the H star tone in the nuclear accent, and the Mandarin high tone of tone 4 was also included as an L1 reference. For both groups of speakers, they had their English H star peaks at around 22 to 25% into the syllable. However, the EFL learners aligned their tones slightly earlier than the native speakers, but this difference was only near significant. As for the alignment of Mandarin high tones in EFL speakers, it was around 30% into the syllable, and this was significantly later than their English H star peaks. In the case of the prenuclear accent, we examined the English H star tone along with the Mandarin high tone of tone 4 word zi. As we can see in this figure, the EFL learners tended to align their peaks of H star slightly earlier than the native speakers, but this difference was not significant, probably due to a larger variability. Also, for EFL learners, their English peaks were aligned much later than their Mandarin ones. As for the L plus H star tone on the word no in the prenuclear accent, we measure the timing of the L target and the H star target in the syllable, as shown in this figure. Let's first look at the orange bars, which represents the alignment of the H star target. Percentages greater than 100% indicate that the peak of the H star target was not realized until the following syllable, the. In the case of the L target, percentages that are negative indicate that the F0 value of the L target occurred in the preceding syllable, I. Interestingly, although both EFL males and females differ from the native norm, their deviations show the gender-dependent pattern. For EFL males, their H star were aligned much earlier than the native speakers. However, their timing of the L target was comparable to that of native speakers. For EFL females, their H star target had similar alignment patterns as that of native speakers. However, their L targets occurred slightly earlier than the native norm. Here are some discussions about the results of this study. To answer the first research question, will the number of prenuclear accent and their placement be different among EFL learners and native speakers? In terms of the number of accents placed, EFL speakers produce more prenuclear accent than native speakers. The default for the EFL learners were 2 prenuclear accents in the sentence, while the default for native speakers were 1 prenuclear accent in the sentence. As for the relationship between accent placement and pausing, it seems that the more prenuclear accents are placed, the higher chances that a speaker would insert a pause, and this is especially true for the EFL learners. So, pausing may be one kind of strategy for the EFL learners to cope with their over-accentuation and stress crash. The results of this study agree with previous literature in that the EFL learners produce more prenuclear accent than native speakers in this study, and they indeed tend to over-accentuate in their production. However, overproduction of pitch accent does not necessarily mean incorrect assignment of pitch accent, as the EFL learners in this study only accented words that were accentable. And there are two explanations for their over-accentuation. One is negative L1 transfer, which means that their over-accentuation in L2 English may be influenced by their L1 Mandarin phonological patterns, because the majority of syllables in Mandarin are assigned a specific tone. Another explanation would be, this is a universal L2 characteristic, which means that the L2 learners are more uncertain over what information should be accented, and use over-accentuation as a strategy to solve this problem. In terms of placement of prenuclear accent, in general, the EFL learners are more variable in their placement of prenuclear accent than the native speakers. And this is not surprising because higher variability is frequently seen in non-native production. Next is the distinction between function word and content word. The EFL learners, like the native speakers, did not accent the function word the. So this may mean that the EFL learners acquire the English rhythmic pattern that function words are often reduced, less prominent, and not accented. Also, the EFL learners avoided stretch clash, like the native speakers, because when the word is accented, the EFL learners were more likely to pause before the following target word, which is the nuclear accent, possibly to avoid stretch clash. This means that although the EFL learners assign more accents, they are using pausing as a strategy to overcome the possibility of stretch clash. The next question was whether the phonological realization of pitch accent, meaning choice of tone types, would be different among EFL learners and native speakers. For nuclear accent, we can see that EFL learners' tone type choices were similar to that of native speakers, and H star is the predominant tone type for both groups of speakers. For prenuclear accents, however, L plus H star and H star are the most popular tone type for both EFL and native speakers. And the tone type inventory for native speakers and EFL speakers were different. Native had an additional tone type, which is the H plus downstep H star tone. Therefore, H plus downstep H tone may be a relatively unfamiliar, relatively difficult tone type for the EFL learners. Or EFL learners may have a smaller tone type inventory to access. The third question was whether the phonetic realization, meaning the tonal alignment of the same tone type, would be different between EFL learners and their native counterparts, and would this be related to their L1? For nuclear accent, the alignment pattern of the English nuclear accent were very similar between EFL and native speakers. This means that the advanced EFL learners in this study had no difficulty producing similar alignment pattern as the native speakers in the nuclear position. As for Mandarin, the alignment of Mandarin was significantly later than the English production of both EFL and native speakers. Therefore, we cannot see a direct L1 Mandarin transfer in this case. In terms of the alignment in the prenuclear accent, let's first look into the English H star tone and the Mandarin high tone in the prenuclear position. The alignments of the English H star produced by EFL and native speakers were not significantly different in prenuclear accents. Thus, for the H star tone, the EFL learners in this study had no difficulty producing native-like alignment pattern in the prenuclear position. Also, the peak of Mandarin high tone was aligned significantly earlier than the English H star tone by both native and EFL learners. Therefore, no direct L1 Mandarin transfer was found in here either. As for the English L plus H star tone in the prenuclear accent, the EFL male aligned their H star significantly earlier than the other three groups, having fewer peaks on the following syllable the. The EFL female, on the other hand, aligned their L target earlier than the other three groups, but this result was not significant. The last research question was, given the special prominence of nuclear positions, Would nuclear accents be easier to acquire than prenuclear accents in an L2 setting? For nuclear accent, the placement is the same between EFL learners and native speakers. They all place their nuclear accent on the last target word in the sentence. And also, similar tone type choices were found between both groups in the nuclear position, and H star was the predominant tone type. And similar alignment patterns were found between the both groups. Therefore, nuclear accent may be easier to master for these L2 learners. In terms of prenuclear accent, EFL learners produce more prenuclear accent than the native speakers, and they tend to show over-accentuation in their production. As for placement, EFL learners were more variable in their placement than the native speakers. And the results of tone type choices also show that the EFL learners have a smaller tone type inventory than the native speakers. As for alignment, for the L plus H star tone in particular, the EFL male aligned their H stars significantly earlier than that of native speakers, and the EFL female aligned their L target slightly earlier. In terms of learnability of nuclear and prenuclear accents, this study shows that English prenuclear accents indeed pose a greater challenge to the EFL learners than the native speakers, and this is similar to what was found in the literature. In this study, the EFL learners' nuclear accent were fairly comparable to those of the native speakers in terms of tone type, accent placement, and tonal target alignment. However, their prenuclear accents diverge from the native norm both phonologically and phonetically. This is the end of my talk. Thank you very much for your listening. The following is my reference.